So here's what happened. Out of nowhere, this 17-year-old stepson, who has literally refused to call the narrator family for years, suddenly demands thousands of dollars for college. Why? Because he found out the other kids' funds were bigger. And when his mom asks the narrator to just take money from their youngest child's account to keep the peace, that's when things get ugly. But honestly, that's not even the craziest part of this story. Okay, so let me back up a little and explain how this whole blended family situation got so tense in the first place. The narrator, let's just call him the stepdad, he married Emily about 12 years ago. Emily had a son from a previous relationship, James, who was around 5 at the time. And the backstory there is pretty messy. Emily left James's biological dad, Dan, because she caught him cheating with a coworker. Classic, right? Dan ended up marrying that affair partner and Emily moved on. So stepdad comes into the picture about a year after Emily left Dan. And honestly, he tried. Like, he admits he tried a little too hard at first to get James to like him. You know, the awkward overcompensating thing. Baby voice, too much enthusiasm, the works. He says Emily later told him he sounded like a circus clown on 2 cartons of Red Bull. Yikes. But once he realized he was making things worse, he backed off. Still, James never really bonded with him. And I mean never. Over the years, they built this weird, tense acceptance of each other. Like they could be in the same room without fighting, but that's about it. No warmth, no connection, just tolerating each other. And it's not just the stepdad. James doesn't have a good relationship with his half-siblings either. The narrator and Emily have 3 kids together, a 10-year-old daughter, a 7-year-old son, and a 4-year-old son. James kind of ignores them. He's not mean exactly, but he doesn't engage. The older 2 kids have started just avoiding him when he's around. So the house is basically divided. Here's the weird part though. James gets along great with Dan's other kids, the sons from Dan's new marriage. Like, he actually enjoys spending time with them. So it's not that James can't bond with siblings. He just chooses not to bond with his mom's new family. And the stepdad, he's tried to figure out why for years. Family therapy. James refused because, and I quote, the stepdad wasn't family. They even tried to work around the custody thing to get him help, but Dan blocked it every time. So they've just been stuck in this weird limbo. Now, despite all that tension, they did try to be fair financially. When the stepdad and Emily started earning good money, they made a plan for college funds. And here's how it broke down. The stepdad would contribute 80% to their 3 kids' college fund. Emily would do the remaining 20% for those 3. But separately, Emily would also handle 100% of James's college fund. Because technically, James isn't the stepdad's biological kid, and Dan wasn't really contributing anything. They didn't even know if Dan was saving for James. But they figured at least this way, James would have something instead of nothing, right? So Emily was putting money aside for him consistently. But here's the thing that always bothered the stepdad. James idolizes his dad. Even knowing Dan cheated on his mom, even knowing Dan lied about stuff, James still looks up to him. Meanwhile, the guy who actually helped raise him for 12 years, who paid for Disney trips and birthday presents and never excluded him from anything, that guy gets called a heartless a-hole. The stepdad says he could handle James's attitude toward him. But what really stung was watching James ignore the younger kids. Like, there was this one birthday where James wanted to go to Disney World. He got to go. Dan's kids were invited, but the stepdad's daughter, who's the same age as Dan's youngest, she wasn't invited, and the family just stayed home. That kind of thing happened a lot, so you've got this household where everyone walks on eggshells. James comes and goes between his mom's house and Dan's house. He's warm and happy at Dan's, cold and detached at his mom's. And the stepdad has just kind of accepted that he'll never be seen as family. Then James turned 17, and Emily sat him down to talk about his college fund. He seemed fine with what she'd saved, happy even. But then he went to Dan's for the weekend, and when he came back, everything changed. He started asking about the other kids' college funds, and when he found out theirs were bigger, he lost it. Suddenly, the stepdad was a heartless a-hole who was pretending to play family. after years of being told he wasn't family, after refusing therapy, after ignoring the younger kids. Now money was the issue. And that's when Emily suggested something that really put the stepdad in a terrible position. She said maybe they could take some money out of the youngest kids fund and give it to James, and she'd add it back over time. She said she wouldn't pressure him either way. But, I mean, what would you do? All right, so here's where everything really blows up. James comes back from his dad's house after that weekend, and he's got questions. He asks Emily about the college funds, how much when they started, all of that. And apparently he said something like, so mine is X amount and theirs is Y, with your husband's money making theirs higher. And without even thinking, Emily corrects him. No, she says, yours is actually this much and theirs is this much. She just blurts it out, a total accidental slip. And yeah, theirs was way higher. James loses it. I mean, furious. He's not just upset, he's livid. He starts accusing the stepdad of pretending to play family all these years. Says he never really cared about James, calls him a heartless a-hole. And then comes the demand. He wants more money. He wants them to even it out. Here's the thing though. This is the same kid who refused to go to family therapy because the stepdad wasn't family. The same kid who ignored his half-siblings for years, who spent every holiday and birthday being treated exactly the same as the other kids. Actually, sometimes better, because he was older and got to pick what he wanted. Remember, for his 11th birthday, he got a trip to Disney World while the stepdad's daughter wasn't even invited. And now, suddenly, when there's money on the table, the stepdad is supposed to be family. Emily, caught in the middle, makes a suggestion. She says maybe they could take some money out of the youngest child's college fund and give it to James, and she'd add it back over time. She tells the stepdad she won't pressure him, that she'll accept whatever he decides. But just the fact that she brought it up, you can feel how torn she is. The stepdad hesitates, and I get it. I mean, really think about this. James has made it crystal clear for over a decade that he doesn't see the stepdad as family. He said it out loud. He's refused therapy. He's blamed his mom for the divorce, even after learning about the cheating. He's literally told his mom that if she had cheated, it would be her fault, but Dan cheating. Apparently that's fine. And now, because the numbers came out wrong, the stepdad is supposed to pull money away from his own biological kids. Kids who actually love him, who he has a real relationship with, to give to a teenager who has done nothing but reject him. But here's where it gets really messy. Emily isn't asking him to give his own money. She's asking him to agree to reallocate from the joint fund for their 3 kids, and she says she'll pay it back. So on paper, it's not even a financial loss for him. It's just the principle, and the principle is what's eating at him. Why should James get rewarded for years of detachment and disrespect? Why should the stepdad be expected to step up now, when James has made it painfully clear that the only thing that changed is his awareness of the bank account? So I have to ask you, and I'm genuinely curious what you think here. Is the stepdad wrong for not wanting to pay? Like, yeah, the kid is 17. Yeah, he's been manipulated by his biological dad. But at what point do you stop setting yourself on fire to keep someone warm who doesn't even want you around? Is this petty? Or is it just finally drawing a line? So obviously, the stepdad posted this story online asking if he was the a-hole. And man, the internet had opinions. Most people were on his side, like overwhelmingly. One comment said, not the a-hole, but why in the world did your wife tell him about your other kids' college funds? It's simply none of his business. And honestly, fair point. James was perfectly fine with his arrangement until he knew the younger kids were getting more. Ignorance was bliss, right? Another person pointed out that Emily kind of created this mess by correcting him in the first place. Not malicious, just thoughtless. A lot of people also said Dan needs to step up. Like, hello, that's his biological son. One comment put it perfectly. He has 2 parents to contribute to college. They can fund him. Sounds like Dan had better step up. And the stepdad responded that Dan has never been good at keeping steady income, and his new wife is a stay-at-home mom. So yeah, Dan probably hasn't saved a dime. Another person said, not the a-hole. His father put that entitlement into his head. And that really stuck with me because it's so obvious, right? James didn't wake up one day and decide to demand money. His dad got in his ear. But here's where the stepdad clarified some things, and it just gets worse. He said he doesn't hate that James idolizes Dan. That's not the issue. The issue is that James blames his mom for the family breaking up. Like genuinely blames her for something Dan did. And then there was this dinner table conversation, casual, not even an argument, where James told his mom that she should have just stayed with Dan, forgotten about the cheating. And when Emily asked him, if the situation was reversed and I cheated on your dad and he left me, would you blame him? James said no. He said that would definitely be her fault. Just, straight up, no hesitation. The other kids had to be excused from the table. Imagine hearing your own son say that to you. So yeah, Dan cheats. James finds a way to excuse it. Emily gets cheated on and leaves. Somehow she's the villain. The stepdad also clarified something else that people were getting wrong. When he said he came on too strong with James as a toddler, some people apparently pictured him grabbing a kid by the neck and hissing, "Call me daddy." No, he just used an embarrassing baby voice because he was nervous around toddlers. Cringe, sure, malicious, not even close. And then there's the Disney World thing. I mentioned this before, but let me really lay it out. For James's 11th birthday, he wanted to go to Disney World. So the family planned a trip. Both of Dan's kids were invited. They got to go. But the stepdad's daughter, who's the same age as Dan's youngest son, she wasn't invited. The stepdad and Emily stayed home with her, so they paid for James to go to Disney World with his dad's family, while their own daughter sat it out. Let that sink in. So when people say the stepdad treated James like an outsider, he's like, we tried. Birthdays, holidays, presents. James always got the same as the other kids. Actually more, because he was older and got to pick nicer stuff. But none of it mattered, because in James's mind, the stepdad and his kids were just obstacles. Honestly, reading through the comments, the consensus was pretty clear, not the a-hole. But everyone agreed the whole situation is just heartbreaking. Okay, so here's where the story takes this absolutely gut-wrenching turn, because the stepdad finally sits James down for that conversation, and he tells James straight up, if you expect me to even think about contributing to your college fund, you need to answer some questions. Real questions. And what came out? Man, I don't even know where to start. James finally admits what's been going on behind the scenes for years, and it's so much worse than anyone imagined. Turns out, Dan has been systematically brainwashing this kid since he was basically a toddler. Like even before Emily and Dan officially broke up, they were never married. By the way, Dan used to bring James to his affair partner's house. So James grew up knowing this other woman, familiar with her, and after the breakup, Dan immediately moved in with her. Meanwhile, Emily was a stay-at-home mom who suddenly had to get back on her feet. So James's home life with his mom, chaotic, struggling, at Dan's house. Stable, or at least appeared that way. But here's the really twisted part. Dan never told James the truth about why Emily left. Instead, he told young James that Emily would eventually come back to him, that she just needed time. And then the stepdad came along, and Dan told James, a little kid, that as long as this new man was around, he'd never let Emily go back to Dan. Wait, it gets worse. When Dan married his affair partner, he told James it was temporary, just a way to make Emily jealous. When the stepdad and Emily got married, Dan said that was the stepdad's way of making it even harder for Emily to return to her real family. So for years, James grew up believing that his mom still loved Dan, and this stranger was just blocking it, holding her hostage, basically. Then when James was 13, a cousin on Dan's side told him the truth, that Dan cheated, that's why Emily left. So James asked his mom, and Emily was open and honest. But when James confronted Dan, Dan had an explanation ready. He said Emily had left him for so long, he got lonely, he just needed comfort. He twisted it into something almost sympathetic, and James bought it, because he wanted to. But here's the real dagger. When Emily got pregnant with the stepdad's daughter, Dan told James, and I'm using James's exact words here, that the stepdad had started pumping his spawn into James's mother. That's what a grown man told his child. That spawn had destroyed James's family forever. And the therapy thing. Remember how they kept trying to get James into family therapy? Dan convinced James that it was a ruse, that the stepdad and Emily were really trying to take him to a doctor who would declare him a problem child so they could ship him off to boarding school. Dan said only he and his family were fighting to keep James with them. So James grew up believing that his mom's new family was literally trying to get rid of him. And here's the saddest part. James admitted, straight up admitted, that he'd been faking his behavior strategically. He hoped that if he was cold and detached around the stepdad and the younger kids, if he was warm and happy around Dan's family, that Emily would eventually realize her new family was evil and leave them. He thought if he just withdrew enough, she'd come back to Dan. But then the stepdad kept knocking up his mom. Again, James's words, and every new baby made it harder for her to leave. So when they sat down for this conversation, the stepdad asked James point blank, "If I pay the money, does that make us family? Can we at least be friends? Can you be friendlier with my kids when you're around?" And James said no. Straight up. No. He said after all these years, he knows the stepdad and the kids aren't the evil beings his father made them out to be. But he still feels like the stepdad is the reason his parents never got back together. And for that, he will always hate him. And since his kids are, well, his kids, he's never going to like them either. Then he dropped this bombshell. His plan, once he gets to college, is to cut off contact with all of them. Completely. He says he might eventually forgive his mom. Someday, when he's ready. But he can't right now. Emily, listening to all this, devastated, doesn't even begin to cover it. The stepdad says in that moment, he couldn't even wrap his head around it. 12 years. 12 years of trying. 12 years of being painted as the villain in a story Dan wrote. And James, he just sat there. No remorse, no hesitation. Just, this is how it is. The stepdad asked about the college fund one more time. Like, why now? Why demand money from a guy you hate? And James admitted he was actually fine with what his mom had saved. But Dan made him realize they were undercutting him. So he came back to demand more. At that point, what do you even say? So after that conversation, after hearing everything James admitted, after realizing the depth of the manipulation, the stepdad and Emily had a long, hard talk. Just the two of them. And they made some decisions. The stepdad decided he will not contribute a single dollar to James's college fund. And honestly, after hearing that James straight up said he'll always hate him and never like his kids, can you blame him? Why would you give money to someone who looks you in the eye and tells you that you're the reason his family fell apart, even though you know that's not true? But Emily is still his mom, and she couldn't just abandon him financially. So here's what she decided to do. She will keep adding to James's fund until he turns 18, but she's not just handing him a check. Oh no, she's going to pay the money directly to whatever college he gets into. Tuition, fees, books, straight to the institution. And if James decides not to go to college, then the money sits there until he turns 25. At that point, he gets it, but not a day before. They also set up a legal safeguard. In the very unlikely case that something happens to Emily before James turns 25, their lawyer will be in charge of making sure James gets the money at the right time. No interference. No accusations of the stepdad meddling, just clean, documented, untouchable. And then, Emily had her own conversation with James. She sat him down one more time. She told him, look, if you're hellbent on giving up your relationship with us, then there's no point walking on eggshells around you anymore. She said she was hurt, deeply hurt, and disappointed. For him to believe that his mother was to blame for their family breaking up, that was unacceptable. She didn't yell. She didn't cry, at least not in front of him. She just stated facts. She told him the stepdad won't be contributing, because James doesn't think of him as family, so he has no obligation. And if James still feels his college fund is lacking, then he should ask Dan to make up the difference, his biological father. She also explained the new payment setup, direct to the college, no cash in hand, and the 25 rule if he doesn't go. And then she said something that must have been incredibly hard to say out loud. She told James that from now on, if he doesn't want to come over to their house, he doesn't have to. They talked to their lawyer. She wasn't giving up custody yet, but she wasn't going to force him to stay with her anymore. James just sat there. Silently, he listened to everything, didn't argue, didn't storm out, didn't say a word. That night he stayed in his room at their house, didn't come out. The next day he went back to Dan's place, and since then, radio silence. Nothing, no calls, no texts, no visits. And here's the sad reality of all this. They've done everything they could. They tried therapy, blocked. They tried patience, ignored. They tried fairness, manipulated. They tried love, rejected. At some point you just stop, not because you don't care, but because caring is destroying you. Emily is heartbroken. Of course she is. That's her son. But even she admitted after those revelations that she's having a hard time reconciling her little boy with this cynical, hate-filled teenager. The stepdad says they're looking into individual and couples therapy again. Not to fix James, that ship has sailed, but to heal themselves. Because this kind of wound, it doesn't just go away. They're not giving up on James forever. They're just letting go for now, and hoping that someday, years from now, he sees things for what they really are. But they're not holding their breath. Okay, I don't know about you, but after that whole emotional roller coaster, I think we need a little breather, something lighter. So let me share this quick story that showed up at the end of the post. There's this 21-year-old pharmacy tech. She's working with her friend, right? Just chatting about college classes while they're filing medications. Nothing crazy, not being loud, not bothering anyone, just talking. And then this older coworker, 41, lead tech, just loudly shouts at them. Let's play the quiet game with just you two and see who can go without talking for 25 minutes. Rude, right? Like really rude. All the other coworkers were shocked because nobody else had a problem with the chatting. But this one woman just decided to be, well, a jerk about it. So the tech thinks, okay, fine, you want quiet. I'll give you quiet. But she takes it to a whole new level. She stops talking to that coworker. Period. Like completely. She only responds if she's spoken to first, and even then only if it's about work. Nothing personal. Nothing social. And when she clocks out, she doesn't talk to her at all because apparently this lead tech has complained before about fraternizing with higher-ups outside of work. And here's the best part. She only does this to the one coworker. Everyone else, totally normal, friendly even. The lead tech hates it. She keeps trying to talk to her and the tech just says, "Is this about work?" and moves on. Every single time. It's not mean, it's not aggressive, it's just perfectly malicious compliance. You wanted quiet, you got quiet, just not the way you expected. Honestly, chef's kiss. Sometimes the best revenge isn't yelling or reporting someone. It's just giving them exactly what they asked for and watching them realize they made a terrible mistake. Hey, if you made it this far, I figure you like these kinds of stories. So seriously, thanks for sticking around. I've got a couple more that you might enjoy, some wild ones, some heartwarming, you know. Go ahead and check them out when you have a minute. And hey, if you don't want to miss the next one, maybe hit that subscribe button. Save this for later if you're busy. Either way, appreciate you.